Good afternoon, my friends. This is the Grimflayer, and can you hear it? Can you hear the joy, the happiness in my voice? Well, what's got me so happy on a Monday in the middle of the winter? What's going on? Well, I'll tell you what's going on. We got a trifecta of bands, and I'm pretty pumped about them. Mox Opal has been shattered. Oko Thief of Crowns has been consigned to the dustbin of Modern's history, and Mycosynth Lattice has joined him. See you later. Triple ban. So what's going on with this? Why have they banned these cards? That's what we're here to talk about. So we are going to do a three-part video. First up, just some brief analysis of the ban rationale and what I think about the bans in general. Secondly, we are going to take a trip over to the modern meta, what it looked like before the bans, and I'm going to tell you what you can expect, in my view, which decks to go up, which decks to go down, and which decks to kind of be completely blown out of the water, banned into oblivion, so we can be prepared for the meta shifts to come. And finally, we're going to spend a little bit of extra time talking about the archetypes that I feature on the channel, which is the BGx Midrange family, mostly Rock and Jund, but I do dabble in the others as well, and Mono Red Prowess. We're going to talk about how our beloved archetypes will be influenced by these three bans, and maybe even a little bit about how to build them to prepare for the brave new world of Modern. So let's get right into it, guys. Thank you so much to the Patreon supporters. You make this content possible. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and let's talk about the bans to kick things off. Okay, so to take a quick look at their rationale, they kick things off with some stats, and these stats are very damning. Urza Oko decks had the most 5-0 trophies in terms of raw numbers, and a non-mirror match win percentage of over 55%, and a winning matchup against 9 of the other 10 most popular competitive decks. So there you go. Between that and this number down here, Oko with an inclusion rate approaching 40% of decks in recent league play and tabletop tournaments. These numbers are insane, especially the last one. Like, if you look at pre-Oko top 10 most played cards list, it's like Lightning Bolt, Thoughtseize, Serum Visions, Ancient Stirrings, things like this. 1 mana kind of glue spells, or like consistently useful interactive spells that have broad applications across Modern. The fact that a 2-color, 3-mana Planeswalker has numbers that are anywhere near that, and in fact have in most cases surpassed the numbers of those former kings and queens of Modern, means that this card was just busted. And I know most of you don't need any convincing about that, but I do know that some people out there are the holdouts who say, Oko's fair, Oko's great, Oko's a victim, Oko didn't do anything wrong. It's Mox Opal's fault, it's Urza's fault, it's all the other pieces around him. Oko's great, leave my Oko alone. Well, you know what? I hate to say it, I hate to counter-signal you, but Oko is Broko, and he had to go. No question about it in my mind, and the numbers really back it up. And also, to me, the gameplay that Oko generated, to be fair, was sometimes pretty skill testing and was often very decision intensive. But at the same time, it takes the game so long, and it grinds for days and days and days, but the play patterns that it generates have a great deal of inevitability. So I like grindy games and grindy matchups, but not when they're paired with that much inevitability, because then you have maybe a 5% chance of just like lucking your way out of the Oko value, so you kind of have to keep playing it out, but it's a miserable experience. This actually, I've had this idea, let me know if you want to see a separate video on this. I want to do a theory video about Planeswalker design, comparing, among other things, but the main comparison would be Oko to Liliana of the Veil. We'd call it like Anatomy of a Planeswalker. It'd be a theory video. I'd talk about why there's a lot of parallels between the two, but why Oko's design was terrible and Liliana of the Veil's is amazing. That would be the thesis of the video. Let me know if you want to see that. But anyway, that's why Oko was banned. And speaking of what was banned, just for the record, my on-record prediction for this ban update was that Oko +1 would be banned, and both Lattice and Opal were on my list of top 10 ones that I thought were most likely to be banned. So I also thought the +1 would not be Urza. I thought it would be Oko, one other card, the other card's not Urza. So I was mostly right about that, but I didn't think they would ban this aggressively right out of the gate, so they one-upped me. And, I think Opal was actually pretty far down my list as well, so I didn't really expect to see this, but let's talk quick about Mox Opal. This one's bittersweet for me. On the one hand, everything they say here is right. It's a source of fast mana. It has long contributed to strategies that seek to end the game quickly and suddenly. It's high variance. It enables win combos, one-turn win combos, or prison elements. And it has not only kind of been involved with most other sketchy strategies that eventually got some other card banned in the past, it has also been on the watch list for a while and is going to be nearly inevitably part of something broken again. Like, the entire category of artifact is always kind of conscious of whether it will be broken by Mox Opal as far as their design goes. So for all of those reasons, for its past transgressions, its present transgressions, and for the sake of future-proofing the format, it does make sense to ban Mox Opal. And it is an extreme outlier in terms of the sheer power of mana acceleration that it provides. All of that is true, so for that reason, I can't really rationally argue against it. But just to provide a little bit of a countervailing commentary, part of Opal's appeal, and indeed part of the appeal of Modern to me, was seeing like a genuine Mox see play in Modern and playing against it and beating it. Like, it's kind of cool. Now, it's not cool when they're going turn 1 Gilded Goose, turn 2 Oko, turn 3 Urza off of the back of Mox Opal, obviously, but Mox Opal in Affinity was kind of cool. Mox Opal in Hardened Scales is pretty cool. And can we get an F, by the way, in the comments? F in the comments for Traditional Affinity. Awesome deck. Pillar of the format right up until about a year ago. Started stumbling. It was on its last legs, and this just killed it off until further notice. So F in the comments for good old Affinity. A victim of the Mox Opal ban, but hey, again, can't really argue against it, but it's a little bit bittersweet to me. But you want to know what's not bittersweet is the ban of Mycosynth Lattice. So, they write here that it's completely a lockout, it's unfun, and the deck building cost to include this interaction is low, and we also intend for this to be a small but meaningful balance change to Eldrazi and other Tron decks. I completely co-sign all of this. I think this is an amazing change. I think it is viable to consider fun factor when making ban decisions. Guys, this is a game. We need people to have fun playing the game, or the game's not going to thrive and flourish. No question about it. So, while there's some degree of subjectivity to it, I think this is about the least as objective as it gets, that losing to the Mycosynth Lattice lock is unfun. You can't really say, well, that's just subjective. Who likes to do that? And the people who defend the presence of this card, the argument usually goes something like this. Well, Mycosynth Lattice locks you out on turn 4 and you effectively lose the game. But you do have outs to it, and even if you do, what's the difference between losing to the Lattice lock on turn 4 and losing to some other combo on turn 4 that outright kills you? Or sometimes those combos kill you even sooner. And that's all true, but here's the most important distinction. Mycosynth Lattice has almost no opportunity cost for its inclusion, because you just have to play one copy, it can always stay in the sideboard, and Karn the Great Creator is a really, really good value piece in basically any big mana deck that cares to play it and cares to include this free win combo. So, you have almost no opportunity cost, and in these big mana decks featuring Karn, they are very, very difficult to successfully interact with, whereas the combo decks that kill you more quickly, more consistently perhaps, they fold, or they at least suffer in the face of repeated interaction. Devoted Devastation is weak to Fatal Push. Storm is weak to Inquisition of Kozilek and Thoughtseize. The list goes on. These are combo decks that you can actually interact with. Whereas the big mana decks, again, you slot this in at almost no opportunity cost. It's very, very difficult to successfully interact with them. And on top of that, it's basically a win condition for them to resolve any number of their other payoffs most of the time against a fair deck anyway, right? So this was just a bridge too far in the context of the decks that it fits cleanly into. Combine that with the desire to nerf Eldrazi and other Tron variants just a little bit, and also the fun factor. Great ban, cannot argue with it at all. Finally, before we move on to the meta talk, let's look at their Pioneer write-up. I really like this write-up for a couple reasons. We'll talk about what they say. So, no changes right now. And they say, we're also aware of the community buzz around the combination of Heliod, Suncrowned, and Walking Ballista in Pioneer. In keeping with our philosophy of letting the Pioneer metagame prove itself, their plan is not to take any preemptive action, but if the results eventually warrant it, they will. So this is amazing for a couple reasons. Number one, I think no changes right now is fine, so I'm all on board with that. But number two, they're not playing dumb here. And they're also giving us fair warning. So they're saying, we know, and you know that we know all about this combo before it's even legal. Like, it's not like it's going to come out and nobody's going to discover it for a few weeks. Like, everybody's going to be jamming this when it comes out. So they're not pretending that doesn't exist. So this is kind of a fair warning to people who want to buy into the cards or buy into the deck. They have this combination on notice before it's even legal. So this really is a good signal of intent, not only for specifically monitoring the Heliod Ballista combo, but also going forward. I'm very optimistic between this Pioneer write-up and the bans that we saw in Modern that they will curate these formats well going forward. Now, whether they will stop designing so many broken cards, that is something I'm a little less optimistic about right now. I really just want to see better answers, fewer obviously busted threats make it through design. But that's a separate issue for a separate day. I think their curation of the formats has been pretty good, and I'm kind of even more excited about the write-up here in Pioneer as more fuel for that perspective. So while we're on the subject of Pioneer, just quickly mention, guys, in response to your feedback, and after some consideration, I think my other Pioneer archetype alongside Dark Seasons is probably going to be Mono Black Aggro. I have that kind of soft locked in now, but I haven't bought into it yet. Let me know if you what you think about that in the comments below, of course, but my thinking is it's a very proven strategy. It's very, very strong. It's going to let me learn the format, get a lot of reps with good results, and it's still mid-rangey gameplay with Thought Seizes and Fatal Pushes and all the rest. And, you know, it allows me to pick up more black staples to have a wider collection for Seasons Past or for traditional Rock and Pioneer, maybe pivot into Mono Black Devotion if that ends up being good. So I think that's kind of the way to go. I am still considering another couple's red decks, basically, but thinking about Mono Black. But anyway, let's move on to the Modern meta talk. Okay, my friends, so this is what the Modern meta looked like before the bans, and we're going to talk about each deck in the top 20, and we're going to say whether I expect them to go up or to go down and why. And therefore we can build our mid-range decks, or maybe our Prowess decks for those of you playing it, or whatever else you're playing. You can be better prepared for the changes that I think are likely to come. So, number one, clear best deck in the format was the Sultai Urza Oko deck. Now, this deck doesn't exist anymore. It's got 2 of its 3 most important cards banned, but that does not mean that Urza decks are down and out. You can expect them to stick around, people to keep iterating with them. Urza's still a very, very powerful card. There's a lot of other very powerful things going on. I think the things that we can probably expect to see are them to return to a heavy focus on the Thopter Sword combination as the primary win con, and also maybe for Mox Amber to try to fill the shoes to some degree of Mox Opal. I have heard a little bit of chatter about that, but, you know, I expect a variety of Urza archetypes to see play. I don't know if Paradoxical Outcome is still on people's minds without Opal, but anyway, Urza, it's not going to be dealt with that easily, but hopefully the Urza deck, when all is said and done, is just kind of like another reasonable tier 2 deck in Modern. That would be totally fine. Hopefully Urza himself is something that we don't have to eventually ban as well. Second most powerful deck in the format, Eldrazi-tron, or most popular, but I would also say most powerful. This took a big hit with the ban of Mycosynth Lattice, make no mistake, because unlike Greentron, where it's debatable, I've heard some really good Greentron players say they don't even like Karn in the Karn Great Creator package in Mono Green Tron so much, but Eldrazi Tron, there's no debate there. Karn is a core component of the deck, very important toolbox, value card, and win condition. Well, he's no longer a one-card win condition any longer, and between that, so that's a big blow to Eldrazi Tron, and the fact that I think Eldrazi Tron's meta share is at least in part due to it lining up well in a lot of ways against the Urza Oko deck. You do have the one-card win condition that they might struggle to stop some of the time. You do have Chalice of the Void lining up well against the Urza Oko deck. You do have Thought-Knot, so you're able to disrupt them. It goes on and on. You do have a lot of really good options on Eldrazi Tron, including just going over the top of the Urza decks, which some of the time you would do. So I'm hoping, but I've hoped this before and it's been in vain, but I'm hoping again this time that Eldrazi Tron does suffer as a result of these changes, both direct and indirect. And here in third place, we've got Bant Snowblade. So the Bant shell was obviously carried by Oko to a really significant degree. Now, there's still a lot of good cards in Bant. Now that people have established this snow core, it might be around a little bit more than it was even before Oko came to prominence. Icefang Quattle, Arkham's Astrolabe. These are some very, very strong cards, but nevertheless, I do expect the Bant color shard to really fall off. And the one thing I do want to point out, though, is that even though Bant Snowblade is definitely going to trend down in meta share, the card Stoneforge Mystic in and of herself, in a vacuum, loves these bans, because we have no more Oko turning your Stoneforge or your equipment into Elks, and we have no more Mycosynth Lattice win condition, which can be a little bit hard to race when you're on a Stoneforge deck, and maybe a reduced presence of Karn the Great Creator, which is a one-sided Stony Silence. So all of these changes seem really good for Stoneforge Mystic, but I don't think Bant will necessarily be her best shell. It might be kind of a Death Shadow type of situation where there's a variety of shells, variety of color combinations, and which one is best will kind of fluctuate with the meta. That's my prediction anyway. Here in fourth, we had this monstrosity of a deck, Simic Titan. I've heard it called Titan Field. It's literally just like a linear ramp deck that just makes land drops and has Oko extend the game until they beat you with Primeval Titan and Field of the Dead. Very dumb, very stupid gameplay, not to put too fine a point on it. Really don't see the appeal of such a deck existing, and thankfully, I don't think it does anymore, because Oko's gone, and now it cannot just have just these planeswalkers that are good no matter what and extend the game no matter what until they hit their very difficult to interact with late game with a great deal of inevitability. So don't get me wrong, I think big mana is actually poised to be a big winner of these changes, even though this big mana deck, as far as I can tell, is mostly killed off, and this big mana deck, Eldrazi Tron, takes a blow. I think that traditional mono green Tron and Amulet Titan are two big winners from these changes, so still gotta come prepared for the uphill battle of big mana with our mid-range decks, but maybe it's strangely enough we're happier to see those ones that are rising up in meta, right? I just mentioned Shadow. Here it is. This is a 4-color Shadow deck. Now, a lot of these have been playing Oko. Obviously, that's no longer on the table for them. Do they stay in green? Because there's a lot of good stuff in green. There's Tarmogoyf, there's Traverse the Ulvenwald, there is Once Upon a Time. I expect, as I just mentioned, there to be some contention a variety of viable color combinations, all executing the core Shadow strategy with different supplementary things. I mean, we could even see if the format gets grindier, it goes back to Mardu Shadow, which is arguably one of the best grindy variants of Shadow out there, especially now that Oko's no longer available to them. Or are we getting to the point where the format's going to be that much faster, and maybe Grixis Shadow just resumes its throne as one of the decks to beat of the format? I don't know. I could see Shadow going either way, and I think which way it goes depends on how the rest of the format shakes out. Shadow is a good police deck for combo decks, and if the format is too skewed towards certain other archetypes, it might not do so well. So that one we'll have to see. Here in 6th place, we have my beloved Mono-Red Prowess. They call it Mono-Red Blitz here. As I said, we're going to talk about my archetypes in more depth at the end, but for now, let's just say things are looking up. Things are looking up for Prowess. I'm very optimistic. Bant Snow Control, much like Bant Snowblade, this was a shell that I think was carried to a serious degree by Oko, so it's very possible that Blue-White Control goes back to being the control deck of choice. Once again, now that people have seen some of the power of the Bant color trio, maybe it doesn't recede into nothingness altogether, but with Tron and Amulet Titan, Field of Ruins looking a little bit better, so maybe Blue-White Control we can expect to resume its throne as the Control King. But you guys let me know if you Control players out there. I know there are some of you watching this. If you have any other takes. Mono Green Tron. As I already mentioned, I do think this is going to be a big beneficiary. It's not that dependent on Karn the Great Creator. Again, lots of good Tron players don't even really love that Karn package and the Wishboard and all the rest, and they've still got Veil of Summer to protect their very busted big mana things. And Tron, even when there's lots of reasons not to play Tron, as we had in the pre-ban meta that we have a snapshot we're looking at right now, it was still a really solid tier 2 with a solid 3% meta share. We expect this to be a relative winner. And we here see another Shadow variant. Again, which one takes preeminence is going to depend on a variety of factors, but we'll expect to see Shadow in the mix one way or another, no doubt about it. And here at 10th, we've got Amulet Titan. As mentioned, I think this is a big winner. They still have Once Upon a Time, they still have Veil of Summer, and other big mana decks have taken a hit. Therefore, Amulet Titan, a very strong deck's gotten a lot of new tools lately. I think it is poised for a major resurgence. And that's not great for us on BGx, but it's less egregious than the Titanfield deck, and it is probably still a better matchup than Eldrazi Tron, if you ask me. Amulet Titan, there are at least some points of interaction. We have a lot of good tools. If we want to really tech against it, we can. So I expect Amulet Titan to be a big beneficiary of these ban changes. And then we have Infect and Humans. Two Noble Hierarch decks. I think Infect is an enormous beneficiary here because, again, they get to retain Once Upon a Time. They get to retain Veil of Summer. Eldrazi Tron with their Chalice of the Void and their Thought-Knot Seers does take a hit. And the only reason Infect wouldn't go up is if it was well-positioned now, partially because it preyed upon Oko and Urza decks. I don't know if that's the case. I don't really think so. I think Infect, with these recent additions of Veil and Once Upon a Time, is a genuinely very strong deck. So I think Infect will go up, and I think, despite the very annoying presence of Veil of Summer, it's my only regret for this ban list thing, by the way, that Veil of Summer is still around. Despite the presence of Veil, Infect is a matchup we want to see on BGx for sure. Just more incentive to play the Plague Man. Plague Man doesn't stop Veil of Summer, or vice versa, rather. So Infect will go up, and Humans will also go up. I consider Humans to be similar to Burn, in that they are very proven, very strong. They're kind of new pillars of the format. Unlike Affinity, F in the comments for Affinity. And that said, they can be outclassed somewhat easily when something truly breaks the format like we had going on until today. So humans, when the format is balanced, humans is one of the strongest decks. When there's something that's a clear outlier, humans often can't compete with it. That's how I see the deck. So now that the outlier is gone, humans is going to go back to being a top tier deck, in my view. And it also, again, another way it's similar to Burn is that it's just a very proactive thing to do. So when the format's in flux, you play your tribal deck, you turn them sideways. Humans, we can count on rising up, in my view. And we mentioned Burn, there it is, coming hot on the heels of humans. All the things I just said apply here. Burn, a very powerful deck. If you remember, before Oko took over the format, I think Burn was number one in many weeks or many periods of time in the immediate era preceding Oko's rise to prominence. And I think Burn single-handedly was killed off the most by Oko in a vacuum, you know. Yes, Oko in certain shells might have been a problem to varying degrees for Burn, and certain Oko shells might have been even worse for other decks than they were for Burn, but in terms of just one deck that hates one card, it would be Burn hating Oko, never wanting to see him again, and now they never have to, at least in Modern, so no question that we have to be prepared for Burn in the few weeks to come as the format goes into flux. Devoted Devastation, just like Infect, it's a small creature deck, a Noble Hierarch deck, a combo deck basically, with some value elements, but they got Veil, they got Once Upon a Time, they're going to be fine, they're going to be doing pretty well, and as long as the format's not too interactive, they could actually be one of the best decks going. Now, speaking of interaction, we have to go, all the way down here to 15th place to find a BGx deck. That's very sad times, guys, but hey, we're going to turn that around. We're going to change it. We are poised to really rise, in my view, with Jund and with other BGx decks. Again, we'll talk about that at the end of the video. Let's just round things off quick. These three decks, Dredge, Crabvine, Giftstorm, they all are somewhat graveyard dependent, certainly these two more than the middle one. And there's definitely always kind of a vacuum that needs to be filled in the Modern format by all-in graveyard decks, so don't skimp on your graveyard hate. No reason these decks are really going to be any worse off, I guess. I don't know that they're going to be that much better off. I think they'll kind of live and die based on how much hate people are playing, but come prepared. Giftstorm is one that's going to really live and die, in my view, based on how interactive the format is. So I could see overall the format getting a little more linear and race-oriented, in which case Storm is going to be great. Or I could see some of the black-based interactive decks like BGx and Shadow coming in to fill the void left by Oko. Maybe if Big Mana takes a knock as well, those decks really shine, so then Storm is in trouble. So this one is going to be meta-dependent. And finally, rounding it out, we've got Titan Shift, another big winner. Titan Shift is a big winner here, make no mistake. They're a traditional big mana deck that was kind of outclassed by the more busted big mana decks, but now that things have changed, this is still a proven, really solid archetype with access to Veil of Summer, and kind of the opposite position of Storm, so yeah, if the meta is very interactive, Titan Shift's going to be really good. If the meta is too linear, it's not going to be very good. So you'll probably see either Titan Shift or Storm rise up and the other one drop off. We got another mono-red Burn, whatever, group that in with the other one. And finally, Bogles. Bogles is kind of a spoiler. I see it as a spoiler. Can't really predict where it's going to go one way or the other. I think it's just kind of, there's not necessarily metas that are amazing for or against it. It just kind of is what it is. So if you want to beat Bogles, well, join me in testing out the card Shadow Spear in your BGx decks. I think it's a solid all-around one, and it definitely gives us some more game against Bogles than we'd otherwise have. So there you go, guys. That's my meta breakdown. Now let's spend just a couple minutes talking about BGx and Prowess. Alright guys, so we gotta kick things off. Talking about The Rock, this was my list from the challenge. We snuck in and got published at the very lowest possible placement that you can achieve and still get published. The video, the replay's on the channel if you want to check that out. We had some horrific variants at the end. We were 4-1 going into the end, and then lost to, guess who? We lost to Oko and Veil of Summer a couple times, so that was a little bit horrendous. But as you can see, my list here is well-rounded and is pretty well tuned to beat or compete with the Urza Oko decks due to a variety of things, including the sideboard, but we don't have to worry about those anymore, and the changes for Rock overall are very positive. Eldrazi taking a hit, this is huge. Huge for Rock. It's one of our very worst matchups. Mox Opal getting banned, you could say, well, there goes one of our good matchups, Affinity, but that wasn't really being played anyway. And the Urza Oko decks were beatable, but they were uphill battles. They were solidly unfavored in my view, so we don't need to worry about those as much anymore. And arguably, like, the value shells playing Oko, everything from like a 4-color mid-range pile to like just like a Bant control deck with Oko, Snow Control or Snowblade, those are even worse matchups for straight green-black the Rock. So Oko gone is amazing for us. Opal gone is kind of whatever, but, we will compete with those decks probably on a similar level either way. And Karn package taking a big hit with the ban of Lattice is great news as well for the Rock. So I expect Rock and indeed Jund to make up a great deal of progress that we have lost recently in terms of our meta share. So let's tab over here to this Jund list, and as we're looking at it, realize that Kroxa, Titan of Death's Hunger, is a card that I think will Jund and has a nice 2-of slot waiting for it somewhere in a stock Jund list, just like this one. But again, we don't need to lean as heavily on the cards that we had to play to beat Oko or to beat the Urza decks. We don't have to worry, hopefully, as much about the Eldrazi Menace, and we have new tools in the form of Kroxa, and perhaps Shadow Spear will Jund as well. I plan on making Shadow Spear Rock. In terms of Jund, I'm not as experienced, so I don't know if I'm going to shove it in right away, especially because I'm trying Kroxa out, but we'll see how all that goes. But we do have some breathing room now on these BGx archetypes, and we do have one of the best grindy games around in the format now that Oko is gone, so this is very, very exciting times for us. I fully expect Jund to be well-positioned going forward. One of the strongest value decks in the format, but if Field of Ruin proves to be really, really important in the meta with a lot of big mana strategies going around, and if Burn is the deck to beat, then Rock might even be the deck to play over Jund. That's why we gotta test both. We gotta have some fun playing both, and that is the plan. And finally, guys, let's touch on the future, the short-term future of Mono Red Prowess. I think this deck is awesome. I've said for a long time I think it's very underrated. It's starting to become accurately rated because people are starting to realize just how good it is. And honestly, all of the bans are great news for it too, so Eldrazi is a tough matchup for Prowess because they've got huge threats. They disrupt your hand with Thought Knot Seer, and they play main deck Chalice of the Void. As you can see, that can be very effective against this deck. But again, Eldrazi taking a hit from the ban, and Oko going is huge news. Now, I will say that Mono Red Prowess is not Burn. It's not that soft to pure life gain. It's not that soft to Oko. We can really win through that card, and I have before on the channel, but all that said, Oko's still a very good card against a red deck wins deck of any variety, and if the opponent is otherwise keeping the game close and then they slam in Oko and then maybe there's a second one after you fight through the first one, that's a tough nut to crack. That's a tough one to win through. So these changes, guys, these changes are huge in my view for Mono Red Prowess. I think this is very, very highly recommended by me. If you're a mid-range player, you want a second archetype, it's cheap, it's proactive, it's a change of pace, and it's very, very strong, and it has a lot of room for growth in the future, because remember, an innocuous draft common, Crash Through, really revolutionized the archetype in a lot of ways. You could see a Faithless Looting unban down the road. This archetype has a lot of room for growth, so I can recommend it, and I think the bans make it even better. Alright guys, this video has gone on quite long enough, but I do hope you enjoyed it. I know a lot of you love delving deep into speculation and theory and analysis. My only regret, as I said, my only regret is that Veil of Summer is still with us. But look, we're going to see bans on a much more regular basis. And it is true that Veil will not be as egregious when it's not protecting Oko. That is for sure. There's no doubt about it. There's no question about it. That said, I am still inherently opposed to Veil of Summer because in an era where we are continually being... we're continually on the receiving end of really broken threats that they clearly didn't test thoroughly enough, that warp the formats over and over again, and we're not getting answer cards, interactive cards to compete with them. One of the most impactful non-threat spells that they print in this era is something that specifically punishes in a really, really brutal way people trying to interact in traditional ways with discard and removal and permission. I just can't condone this. With my silence, I can't condone this blasphemy, so I'm still an enemy of Veil of Summer, but we didn't get it banned this time, maybe next time, and certainly it won't be as bad right now due to the other changes around it. So we'll see what happens with that. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned to the channel because as soon as the new set is out, we're going to jund them out with Kroxa. We're going to rock them with some Shadow Spear, and we are going to keep playing Mono Red Prowess, as well as some Mono Black, it looks like, still pending some of your feedback, but soft lock into Mono Black in Pioneer. I will see you around for all of that, and of course I look forward to seeing your feedback here in the comments section. Take it easy, guys. I hope you didn't lose too much with the bans. I know some of you had playsets of Opal and of Oko, rather. Hope that wasn't too many of you. Hope you were at least prepared mentally for that. Anyway, guys, I will talk to you soon. Hope everybody out there has a wonderful day, and let me know what you think about these bans.